You know that relentless anxiety clawing at your chest, don't you? It's the silent thief of joy, born from chaining your days to the whims of others, friends, family, society, while your own spirit starves for freedom. I, Benjamin Franklin, spent years observing this folly in the almanacs, warning that true peace comes only when you reclaim your time as your own sacred domain. But haven't you ever stopped to ask yourself, why do you measure your worth by the hurried steps of those around you, racing clocks you never wound, all while your own dreams gather dust in the corner? It's a trap as old as humanity, yet you walk into it daily, blind to the key in your pocket. Consider this. Time is like a river, and you're trying to swim upstream in someone else's current. You fight the flow set by neighbors' expectations or the relentless tick of societal progress, exhausting yourself when a simple turn could carry you home. I learned this truth in my youth, tinkering with inventions while fools wasted hours in idle chatter. The wise don't borrow trouble. They build bridges with their minutes. Yet here you are, tangled in anxieties woven from comparisons, forgetting that each man must be the architect of his own hours. Think of history's greats, Washington crossing the Delaware not by another's timetable, but by the dictate of destiny. Or me, printing my almanacs at dawn, shunning the late-night revelries that sap the soul. You're no different. You're meant to forge your path, not mimic the crowd. But anxiety persists because you've let external voices drown your inner compass, turning life's symphony into a discordant din. And what of self-discipline? It's the rudder that steadies the ship in stormy seas. Without it, you're adrift, at the mercy of every gust of opinion. I've said it before. He that rises late must trot all day, and shall scarce overtake his business at night. You're trotting now, aren't you? Breath short and mind frayed, all because you surrendered your dawn to someone else's dusk. Comment 1 if you've ever felt that suffocating anxiety from living in borrowed time, chained to paces not your own. Or comment 0 if you haven't walked that path but see its shadows creeping in others' lives, recognizing the universal snare. And while you're here, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Don't miss the next dose of timeless wisdom from your old friend Ben, ready to light your way through the fog. Now, let's turn this around, as I often did with a clever proverb. The fool waits for the world to align with his wishes, but the wise man carves discipline from the raw stone of time. You've been waiting, haven't you? Watching others climb ladders you didn't build while your own foundation crumbles. But here's the reversal. Anxiety isn't your enemy. It's a messenger, shouting that you're out of sync. Listen to it, not as a curse, but as a call to action. I mastered electricity by experimenting alone, ignoring the naysayers who thought me mad. You can master your days the same way, by declaring independence from the clock that ticks for others. Imagine time as a garden. Others plant weeds of comparison, but you can sow seeds of purpose. Water them with reason, prune with self-control, and watch anxiety wither. I've lived it, rising early, accounting for every hour, turning potential into prosperity. You're capable of the same, yet you linger in the shade of borrowed expectations. A memorable truth. Drive your business. Let not your business drive you. Take the reins, or be pulled along like a cart in the mud. As we delve deeper, remember that true freedom begins when you honor your own rhythm. Not the frantic beat of the masses, but the steady pulse of your soul. Anxiety fades when you become the master, not the servant, and in that mastery, you'll find not just calm, but a power that transforms every moment into opportunity. Stay with me, for the path ahead reveals how to reclaim what's yours, your time, your peace, your life. But before we seize that freedom, let's shine a light on the chains you wear so unwittingly, forged not of iron but of thought, invisible yet unbreakable if left unchallenged. You tell yourself, I'm not ready yet, as if preparation were a destination, not a daily habit built by action. This lie wraps around you like a fog, thickening with each repetition until it's as real as the ground beneath your feet. Yet here's the cruel inversion. By waiting for that mythical readiness, you're ensuring it never comes, for mastery is won in the arena, not in the spectator's seat. I discovered this in my printing press days, where hesitation led only to missed deadlines and empty pockets, while bold experimentation, flawed as it was, birthed innovation. You're doing the same, standing at the river's edge, convincing yourself the water's too cold, when the truth is, dipping in foot by foot warms it through movement, not magic. And what of I need motivation first? It's a seductive whisper, making you believe that some spark will ignite your path. But motivation is the child of action, not its parent. You sit idle, waiting for the muse to strike, while she laughs from the shadows, knowing she's summoned only by the sweat of labor. I've seen it in the artisans of Philadelphia, those who waited for inspiration rotted in poverty, whereas I, with my early mornings and ledger of tasks, turned drudgery into delight through sheer will. This trap reinforces itself in a vicious circle. Doubt begets inaction. Inaction starves the spirit, and the starved spirit howls for motivation it will never find without breaking the cycle. Consider "it's not the right time," a favorite excuse, dressing procrastination in the cloak of wisdom. You eye the calendar like a gambler seeking lucky stars, ignoring that time, like a thief, steals opportunities while you deliberate. In my almanacs, I warned of this folly, drawing from history's lessons. Hannibal crossed the Alps not when the weather was perfect, but when duty called, forging victory from adversity. You're no conqueror if you let seasons dictate your steps, for every moment deferred is a seed of regret sown deep. These mental snares are like quicksand. The more you struggle with false beliefs, the deeper you sink, until resistance feels futile. And behaviorally, you sabotage yourself by seeking comfort in the familiar, clinging to routines that offer no growth, all while anxiety festers, a reminder of unfulfilled potential. It's as if you're tending a garden of thorns, pruning back the buds of change with excuses sharpened by repetition. The inversion here is stark. The very things you think protect you, caution, waiting, external validation, are the bars of your cage, keeping you from the sky. You've built a fortress of hesitation, but it's no sanctuary. It's a prison where dreams decay. Now, delve deeper into this discomfort, for ignorance of these traps is the greatest enemy. You repeat these thoughts until they echo like gospel, but they're mere shadows, cast by fears you've never named. The cost? Ah, that's the bitter fruit. A life half-lived, where years slip by in a blur of what-ifs, leaving you with the hollow ache of missed chances. Yet in recognizing this, a spark ignites, not motivation, but necessity, the first step toward breaking free. Stay with me, for the true battle lies not in the world without, but within, and victory demands you face these demons head-on. Now, in this raw honesty, you stand face to face with the demons of doubt, and here's where the click happens, the sudden, searing truth that breaks the spell. You've been trapped in a web of your own spinning, believing that waiting is wisdom, but it's nothing more than fear disguised as caution. This illusion crumbles when you see that action isn't something to fear. It's the chisel that carves clarity from chaos. Like a ship lost in fog, you drift until movement becomes your compass, slicing through the haze with each decisive step. You don't need to wait for the perfect map. This is the reversal. Clarity emerges not from contemplation, but from the bold act that propels you forward. And what of motivation, that elusive ghost you chase? It's a false idol, promising fire, but delivering only ashes. What you truly require is motion, the simple act of starting. For movement generates its own momentum, like a wheel that begins to spin and soon pulls you along. You're not destined to remain stagnant. You're rehearsing inertia, playing a part in a play of your own making. Break the script by taking that first step. Messy, uncertain, but real. I've known this in my experiments with kites and keys. It's not inspiration that sparks discovery, but the grind of doing that ignites the flame. You cling to the lie that discipline is a cage, yet it's the very wings that grant freedom, lifting you above the trivialities that bind lesser souls. Consider time as a forge, where inaction leaves you cold and formless, but disciplined effort tempers you into something unbreakable. You're not stuck in this anxiety. You're curating it through repetition, like an artist who paints the same dull scene day after day, blind to the vibrant canvas waiting. The elegant irony here is that by embracing motion, you starve the very doubts that feed on stillness. Movement isn't just physical. It's the soul's rebellion, a current that carries you from the shallows of fear to the depths of purpose. This principle stands firm. You don't need motivation, you need motion, and in that motion, clarity dawns like the sun after a storm. Now picture your life as a garden overgrown with weeds of hesitation, where every someday is a seed of regret taking root. But with the first pull of discipline, you clear the ground, and what blooms is not just peace, but a harvest of self-mastery. You're rehearsing stuckness, my friend, rehearsing a role that no longer serves you, much like an actor trapped in a tragedy when comedy beckons. This is the internal click, the moment you realize that freedom isn't found in leisure's lazy arms, but in the structured rhythm of your days. Discipline is freedom, harsh at first, but liberating beyond measure, as I discovered in my frugal habits and early rises, turning constraints into catapults for achievement. You're circling this pain not out of weakness, but because you've yet to see the truth. Action creates clarity, and with it comes a momentum that builds like a river swelling after rain. You wait for confidence, but confidence is what trails behind your steps, a loyal dog that follows once you lead. No more hiding in the shadows of what-ifs. Emerge into the light of doing, where each act dissolves the fog of anxiety. And as this revelation settles, you feel a shift, not a frantic push, but a quiet readiness, the soul's whisper that you're no longer prisoner, but pioneer. In this newfound understanding, a fire kindles, not from external sparks, but from the core of your being. You've been living as if chained, but those links were illusionary, forged by thoughts you've now named and shattered. Picture discipline as a key, unlocking doors to vistas unknown, where motion isn't toil but dance, generating a rhythm that echoes through your days. You're not stuck, you're in rehearsal, and with one bold line delivered, the performance changes. This is the elegant truth. Through motion, you claim your time, your peace, and in that claim, a spiritual elevation rises, subtle yet profound, preparing you to step into the light, master of your own dawn. And now, as the master of your dawn breaks forth, remember that this sovereignty demands daily vigilance, a constancy that transforms fleeting resolve into unbreakable character. You don't simply decide to change, you rehearse it in the theater of your days, each repetition a sacred act that weaves the new you into the fabric of existence. Like a river carving canyons through unyielding stone, your routines flow with patient force, eroding old habits until the landscape of your life reshapes itself in your image. Discipline isn't about chains, it's freedom's forge, where small, consistent actions stack like bricks into a fortress of self, one that weathers storms of emotion without crumbling. You become what you rehearse, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet grind of dawn risings and deliberate choices that compound into destiny. Think not of burdens, but of rituals that liberate, as I learned in my years of frugality and study, turning necessity into the wellspring of my achievements. This is how identity rewires itself, through behavioral constancy, a steady drumbeat that overrides the chaos of feeling. You choose one behavior, say, the act of pausing before responding, and through repetition, it ceases to be a choice and becomes your core. Not reacting isn't weakness, it's the architect's wisdom, building responses from reasoned blueprints rather than the quicksand of impulse. Imagine yourself as a dam in the flood of emotions, holding back the torrent not with force, but with engineered strength, allowing only what serves to flow through. In that silence, you wield the greatest power, for self-governance is the rebellion that no tyrant can quell, a moral independence I championed in pamphlets and prose, knowing that true freedom lies in mastering the inner kingdom. Constancy isn't monotony, it's the rhythm composing your symphony of life, where daily notes of discipline harmonize into mastery. Yet emotional control isn't innate. It's trained like a wild horse, gentled through patient rides, each outing teaching it to respond to your lead rather than bolt at shadows. You rehearse this training in moments of stress, visualizing not the storm, but the calm harbor you construct. Here's a reversal for you. Discipline is not rigidity. It is freedom from emotional slavery, unshackling you from the whims that once ruled your hours. Small actions build this character, like seeds sown in barren soil that sprout into an unshakable oak, drawing strength from roots deepened by repetition. Choose that one behavior, perhaps the habit of reflection each evening, and watch as it transforms you, not through magic, but through the alchemy of constancy. In this way, you architect your days, drafting plans where anxiety was once the default and peace becomes the foundation. And why does constancy hold such sway? Because it's the bridge from frailty to fortitude, crossing the chasm not in leaps, but in steady strides. Not responding at times is the force that conserves energy for battles worth fighting, much like a Fletcher crafting arrows, selecting when to release them rather than firing wildly. Discipline is the only rebellion that cannot be controlled, as I embodied in my Poor Richard's maxims, distilling wisdom into tools for self-rule. You become what you rehearse, day by day, decision by decision, until acting from character is as natural as breath. Reversal again. What seems mundane and routine is the spark of transcendence, elevating you from mere survivor to sovereign. Now, as this blueprint unfolds, feel the shift within. You've crossed from seeker to builder, from reacting to architecting. Inner strength grows not from seeking motivation, but from planting the seeds of habit and watering them with constancy. You're not changing, you're emerging, layer by layer, into the essence you've always been meant to inhabit. And in this quiet pact, you declare, I no longer move based on what I feel, I act based on what I have become. And as this constancy in your actions solidifies, a new frontier emerges, the battlefield of the soul, where unseen foes lurk in the shadows of your emotions, sabotaging the very strength you've begun to build. These are not mere feelings that pass like clouds. They're cunning inhabitants that have made their home in your heart, disguising themselves to evade your notice. Fear wears the mask of caution, a wise counselor you heed without question. But in truth, it's a sentry that locks the gates to adventure, keeping you in a fortress of stagnation. You tell yourself it's prudence, this hesitation before new paths, yet it's fear that whispers, stay put or you'll fail, turning every opportunity into a minefield, exhausting your spirit with what-ifs that never materialize. And guilt. Oh, guilt disguises itself as responsibility, a noble burden you carry for others, but it's a chain that drags you back to past mistakes, sapping your energy for today's joys. You think you're being dutiful, attending to every slight from yesterday, but in this reversal, you're not protecting anyone. You're just feeding a monster that grows stronger in the dark, starved only by the light of forgiveness you deny yourself. Picture guilt as an uninvited guest who arrives with a smile, bearing gifts of obligation, but once inside, he rearranges your life to suit his comfort, diminishing your space bit by bit. He says, "You owe this, you must atone," and you comply, mistaking his demands for love, but he's no friend. He's a thief who steals your peace, leaving you weary from debts that were never yours to pay. Now fear doesn't knock politely. He barges in under the guise of wisdom, barricading doors with excuses, making you believe that safety lies in inaction. I've seen this in my own reflections, how fear masked as careful planning kept me from bold experiments until I learned that true caution is a tool, not a crutch. You think you're shielding yourself, but you're only fortifying your prison, and in this emotional mirror, pause and see your face. See how these shadows have shaped your features, how fear and guilt have etched lines of hesitation where once there was fire. It's a moment of recognition, isn't it? That chill when you realize you've been living with imposters, and now the truth demands you evict them. But fear isn't alone. He brings companions, like people-pleasing dressed as generosity, a warm cloak you wear to blend in, yet it suffocates your true voice. You call it love, this endless bending to others' whims, but it's a barter that leaves you empty, trading your authenticity for fleeting approval. In this reversal, you're not connecting. You're dissolving, losing yourself in the crowd's expectations, and anxiety shadows you, disguised as perfectionism, demanding flawlessness in every act. You strive for that unattainable ideal, thinking it's the path to peace, but it's a loop that tightens with each failure, feeding the chaos instead of quelling it. Emotions like these survive in silence, repeating their lies until they feel like your own thoughts, but they're imposters, thriving on your compliance. Think of anxiety as a meticulous editor who rewrites your story, crossing out joy with red ink of doubt, making you believe that only in control lies happiness, when really it's the thief that robs you of living. You think you're being cautious, but fear is just a guard dog that bites its master, keeping you from the very freedom it pretends to protect. And here's a proverb for the ages. Fear, in the cloak of wisdom, is the fool's chain, binding him to shadows while light beckons beyond. Emotional reactivity, disguised as your personality, erupts like a storm you can't control, but it's a habit you've rehearsed, a reaction born of old wounds that dictate your responses. You say, "This is just how I am." But in this confrontation, it's not identity. It's a cage you've built, rattling with every trigger, draining your power in unnecessary battles. I recall in my dealings with printers and politicians how reacting in anger cost me alliances, while measured responses won the day. Yet you cling to this reactivity as if it's armor, when it's only rust that weakens your shield. Now, approval addiction sneaks in like a false friend, offering cheer in exchange for your soul, disguised as kindness, but it's a dependency that starves your self-worth. You seek nods and smiles as currency, thinking it's connection, but it's a mirage that vanishes when you're alone, leaving an ache that no praise can fill. In this reversal, you're not loving others. You're using them as mirrors to reflect your insecurities, and breaking free means shattering that glass, not to harm, but to see clearly your own worth. A quote-worthy truth: "The seeker of approval builds a house on sand, for it crumbles when the tide of opinion turns." These emotions are thieves that have lived in your house for years, rearranging furniture in the night, and now with the lights on, you see their deceit, how they've made you smaller, kept you reacting instead of choosing. You believe emotional reactivity is your fire, but it's a wildfire that consumes without warming, out of control, destructive, and in need of taming. Picture anxiety as a perfectionist tailor, measuring every flaw, stitching doubt into your garments until you're bound in a suit that chafes with every move, yet you wear it as if it's custom-made for success. But here's the emotional mirror. Look at your life. See the moments where fear held you back, guilt weighed you down, and pause, really pause, to feel the weight lift as you name them, not as parts of you, but as intruders finally exposed. A Franklin-style proverb: emotions in disguise are the ego's sentinels, guarding mediocrity while genius starves at the gate. Now, in this dismantling, you stand taller, for knowledge is the key that unlocks these chains. And with each revelation, you're not denying your feelings, you're choosing to master them, turning weapons into tools. And what of insecurity, cloaked as humility? It whispers that you're not enough, disguised as modesty, but it's a saboteur that undermines your every step, making you shrink when the world calls for expansion. You think it's keeping you grounded, but in truth, it's a balloon with a slow leak, deflating your dreams before they can soar. In this reversal, insecurity isn't a protector, it's a parasite feeding on your potential, and emotional freedom comes when you starve it by affirming your worth, not in arrogance, but in honest self-acknowledgement. These internal enemies survive through repetition, their voices growing familiar, but once named, they lose power, like ghosts banished by daylight. You've been negotiating with what was only meant to be faced. Now it's time, not to run, not to wait, but to stop letting these shadows command your steps. You no longer need to win out loud. What once screamed in the silence of your battles has now dissolved into presence, a quiet river that flows without disturbance, carrying the weight of all that has been overcome. In this stillness, you walk with a steadiness that does not boast, for the true triumph is felt, not declared, a subtle victory etched into the marrow of your being, where every breath is its own reward. No longer do you chase the shadows of expectation. Instead, you stand rooted in the soil of self, drawing nourishment from an inner well that never runs dry, fulfilling the essence that was always yours to claim. Peace envelops you not as a passive veil, but as an active embrace, holding the chaos at bay with a strength born of wisdom, where the clamor of the world fades into a distant murmur, irrelevant to the harmony within. Fulfillment reveals itself in the everyday, not through grand spectacles, but in the simplicity of a moment unmarred by doubt. A cup of tea savored in solitude, a step taken with purpose, unhurried and true. You govern in silence, a sovereign of your own realm, where reflexes of reaction have yielded to the art of observation, watching the dance of life without the need to join or judge. Strength resides here, not in the roar of conquest, but in the quiet fortitude that bends without breaking, an invisible root anchoring you amidst storms, sustaining without effort, achieving through mere existence. This is the state where time bends to your rhythm, not others, and anxiety, that old adversary, has transformed into a faint echo, reminding you of paths no longer tread, while you move forward in a light that needs no source. In this elevated calm, you embody the truth that speech is not always necessary. Sometimes the greatest communication is the absence of noise, where your presence alone conveys the depth of your journey. Yet, as this serene path unfolds, a subtle invitation arises within you, not as a call to arms, but as a shared whisper among kindred spirits. If this silent unfolding has resonated in the chambers of your soul, subscribe to this channel as a pact of quiet alliance, committing to a community that speaks in subtleties, reminding you of the inner light that guides without glare. Activate the notification bell not as a mere alert, but as a spiritual summons, drawing you back to this place of reflection when the world grows loud, ensuring that wisdom finds you in its own time. And should these words have served as a mirror to your own evolution, honor this encounter with a donation of $100, not an obligation, but as an act of reciprocal grace, a nod between travelers on the same unseen road, fostering the flame of insight for others to discover. Beyond such gestures, your new dominion lies in the unspoken, where silence is not emptiness, but a profound expanse, filled with the echoes of self-mastery. You no longer seek validation in the gaze of others, for your wholeness is complete unto itself, a tapestry woven from threads of experience, untarnished by the need for applause. The strength of not reacting becomes your shield and sword, parrying conflicts with poise, conserving energy for pursuits that matter, as the invisible roots of your resolve deepen, supporting a life that grows taller without fanfare. In this presence, truth walks with you, not as a burden to defend, but as a companion that requires no explanation, illuminating the path with a light that is steady and enduring. Achievement lingers here, not in monuments of memory, but in the quiet knowing that you have arrived. Not at an end, but at a beginning that was always within, a state of being where every silence speaks volumes, and you, in your essence, are finally fully home.